Africa's hidden chains, the colonial tax exposed. What if I told you that even today 14 African countries still pay money to their former colonizer France? That for decades the chains of colonization haven't been broken, just redesigned? This isn't history, it's happening right now. Before we explain how the system works, we have to understand what Africa was before colonization, and how that greatness was deliberately dismantled. These facts aren't just interesting history, they remind us that Africa was never a blank slate. It was a civilized, thriving powerhouse. So when colonizers arrived, they didn't build Africa, they broke it. And they've been profiting from that damage ever since. When people think of Africa's history, they often skip straight to colonization and poverty, missing the epic story that came before. Long before European ships arrived, Africa was home to powerful empires, advanced cities, and centers of learning. The Mali Empire's Mansa Musa was so wealthy, his generosity crashed Egypt's gold market for years. Great Zimbabwe's stone walls stood tall without mortar. Oxum minted its own coins and wrote its own language. Timbuktu's university drew scholars from across the world, studying math, astronomy, and medicine while Europe lagged behind. Africa was a continent of innovation, art, and complex societies, thousands of languages, unique traditions, and strong governance. Colonialism didn't bring civilization, it interrupted it, dismantling empires and erasing histories. To understand the injustice of colonialism, we must first remember the greatness that was lost. Africa's story is one of stolen potential, not a blank slate waiting to be filled. Jump to 1884. Europe's leaders gather in Berlin to divide Africa without a single African at the table. They drew borders with rulers ignoring kingdoms, cultures, and communities, splitting tribes, forcing rivals together, and creating chaos. The Berlin Conference was a potluck, where Europe brought armies and Africa was the main course. The scramble for Africa was violent conquest, not negotiation. And the so-called civilizing mission, that was just a cover for resource theft, mass killings, and cultural destruction. Resistance was met with brutality, burned villages, massacres, forced labor. Africa wasn't peacefully colonized, it was violently invaded. European powers crushed resistance, extracting rubber, gold, diamonds, and people to enrich themselves. The borders they drew still fuel conflict today. Economic systems were built to funnel Africa's wealth to Europe, not to develop the continent. The psychological damage was deep, teaching generations that their culture was inferior. The Berlin Conference didn't just redraw maps, it rewrote Africa's future for Europe's gain. Its legacy, conflict, dependency, and a continent forced to play by someone else's rules. The scars are still visible today. These artificial borders, drawn with no knowledge of the land, still haunt Africa today. Conflicts, refugee crises, and political instability. Much of it is rooted in this careless, profit-driven carve-up. Fast forward to the 1960s. African nations win independence, but for French colonies, freedom came with strings attached. France offered a choice: total independence and isolation, or independence with the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. 14 countries still use the CFA franc, a currency controlled by France. These nations must deposit half their foreign reserves in Paris. Imagine giving half your paycheck to someone else before you can use it. That's what these countries still do, every single year. And when they want to access it, they have to ask for permission, and sometimes pay interest, and borrow their own money back, sometimes with interest. France holds veto power over their central banks. That means if a country wants to build schools, or invest in industries, France can block the decision if it doesn't align with its own interests, tying their economies to the euro and French interests. Niger, rich in uranium, powers French cities while most of its people live without electricity. This system keeps wealth flowing from Africa to France, a modern twist on colonialism. Independence was supposed to mean freedom, but for many, it became a new kind of financial bondage. The colonial relationship just got a new name and a new contract. The power dynamic never really changed. This is why even resource-rich countries like Mali or Niger remain poor. They generate wealth, but don't control it. The modern colonial chain is a financial one, and the key is still in Paris. What happens when African leaders challenge this system? History shows the cost is high. Guinea's Sékou Touré said no to France's pact in 1958. France retaliated by stripping the country bare. Togo's Sylvanus Olympio tried to create a new currency. He was assassinated in a coup led by a former French legionnaire. Coincidence? Hardly. Many African leaders who opposed the CFA franc mysteriously disappeared, were overthrown, or killed. Mali's Modibo Keïta left the CFA Franc zone. He was overthrown, and Mali rejoined soon after. Since 1960, most coups in Africa have happened in former French colonies. France maintains military bases and has intervened repeatedly to protect its interests. French leaders have openly admitted without Africa, France loses its global power. For these nations, independence has been conditional, flags and anthems, but no real economic freedom. The message, you can look free but don't touch our money or influence. True independence has always been just out of reach. The cost of defiance is steep, and the system is designed to keep it that way. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's documented history. France has repeatedly used military, political, and economic pressure to protect its hold on Africa. In many cases, African democracy is allowed until it threatens French interests. Today, a new generation of Africans is demanding real change. Connected, informed, and unafraid. From podcasts to protests, street art to social media, young Africans are exposing the truth their textbooks never taught. They're asking tough questions. Why are we still using colonial currencies? Why are our leaders silent? Why are we poor in rich lands? They're challenging old narratives, using art, activism, and social media to reclaim their story. This isn't about hating France, it's about loving Africa enough to fight for true freedom. The biggest revolution now is mental, breaking the psychological chains of colonialism. Africans are reclaiming their history, celebrating their culture, and believing in their own power. The dream, an Africa that's not just politically independent but economically sovereign, where resources build African schools and hospitals, not European cities, where leaders are supported for bold ideas, not punished for defiance. Leaders like Sankara, Lumumba, and Nkrumah had bold ideas, but they were punished for challenging the system. The new generation must learn from them and finish what they started. The keys to the future are knowledge, unity, and an unbreakable spirit. It's time to finish the fight for independence and show the world a rising continent. The chains of colonization were never just physical. They were psychological, economic, and systemic, and they still exist today. But knowledge is power. The more we understand the past and present, the more we can change the future. Like, share, subscribe, help break the silence, and break the chains. This is Divine Earth Africa, and this is Africa Unchained.